Christ was denied.
Hanukkah is a wonderful festival. It's a time of joy for family. It has great tradition.
It's nice to keep alive the tradition of Judaism for me. That's what's important to me.
It's greatly important that we do celebrate Hanukkah. It is a freedom that we have the right to have. And if you take away freedom of all kinds of things, and mostly religious, then you take away your life.
To never become our own foe.
It's a time of a great and wonderful tradition and much dramatic history that has relevance for our life today.
Light one candle for all we believe in, that anger not tear us apart. Light one candle to bind us together with peace as a song in our heart.
It's been celebrated for more than 21 centuries by millions of people the world over, yet it remains largely misunderstood. Yes, it is a gift-giving holiday that comes in December, but the gifts aren't brought by Santa Claus. It is Hanukkah. Hello, I'm Reuben Silver. Whether you're Jewish or not, it's likely you've heard of Hanukkah. But what if I were to ask you to explain or define it? Well, it's a Jewish holiday. There's a tradition about lighting candles. It falls around the Christmas season. Well, come to think of it, it's the Jewish Christmas, isn't it? Well, no, not at all. In fact, that's one reason why Hanukkah is so largely misunderstood. Yes, it is a Jewish holiday. There is a candle lighting ceremony, and also games, traditional food, and even gifts. But not many people realize that all these simple rituals are linked to crushing political and religious repression, destruction of one of the most holy places on earth, freedom fighters, guerrilla warfare, and the survival of the Jewish people.
Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Don't let the light go out. Don't let the light go out. Don't let the light go out.
It's hard to imagine that the spin of a dreidel or the lighting of a candle is linked to such horrors and triumphs. To find these links, we need to go back in time. It's over 2,100 years ago, the time of Alexander the Great, the Greek conqueror who not only spread his armies to Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, but also much goodwill to many people. In fact, according to one legend, Alexander had so much respect for the Jewish people and their way of life that when he arrived in Jerusalem, he bowed down and saluted the Jewish high priest. Alexander's reign and the years that followed were of great significance in the land of Israel. It's a piece of history that isn't widely known, a time that's not only fascinating, but inspiring. Rabbi Ben Kamin of the Temple in Cleveland, Ohio, has studied this period and its influence on the Jewish people. His research offers us important insights into the birth of what we know today as Hanukkah.
After Alexander had died and his way had passed with him, the empire of the Middle East that the Greeks had maintained for quite a long time was divided up. Eventually, a Greek-Syrian general known as Antiochus became in charge of that part of the ancient Alexander Empire known as Palestine. To many of the Jews living in Palestine, the Hellenistic way of life was still very exciting. In fact, in some ways, very seductive. They were willing to assimilate, and in exchange for that, to take part in a new civilization. However, Antiochus was more jealous of his power and his prestige in some ways than Alexander. He began to decree that there could be only one way of life in his colonies. And for the Jews, that meant giving up a great deal. Some of the Jews in Antiochus' empire were willing to cooperate. They're willing to give up customs which meant a great deal, which has sustained the Jewish people throughout time, like the sanctity of the Sabbath, the seventh day of the week, a day when Jews pray, a day when Jews in fact turn inward, refresh their souls, a day in which Jews do not go out to work, do not take part in the civic world. Antiochus was deliberate and careful in trying to isolate the Jews from their way of life, and so he outlawed the Sabbath. He decreed that Jews could no longer keep the custom of kashrut, of eating special foods. He, in short, tried to take away from them what made them themselves, their identity.
And in a final effort to gain complete control over the Jewish people, Antiochus declared Judaism against the law. The decree read, any adult or child caught practicing Jewish customs would be killed. Now, some Jews obeyed this law. Others ignored it and continued their traditional worship. They paid the consequences. This marks the first time in recorded history that people chose to die rather than relinquish their religious freedom. And nowhere was the anguish more evident, more real than inside the ancient Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Antiochus and his men desecrated this most holy place. They sacrificed pigs. They erected statues of Greek gods, both a direct violation of the Jewish laws of purity. And now, the stage is set. The drama unfolds. The scene, a small village in ancient Israel called Modin.
There lived a Jewish elder, a Jewish high priest, whose name was Mattathias. He was instructed one day by one of Antiochus' henchmen to set up an altar to a pig in the town square, in an area where Jews had gathered to pray and to sacrifice. This simply was too much for this tired old man, who in his lifetime had witnessed so much difficult change, and who would struggle not only with the Greeks, but with many Jews in his own community who were willing to go along and to accept Hellenism in exchange for the culture it offered. Mattathias is said to have cried out, "I will not do this." And then someone else was instructed, another Jew in the town, to set up the altar and to desecrate the Jewish symbols there. And Mattathias, in an act of impulse which changed the world, slew this conspirator and yelled out, "Whoever is for me, whoever is for the Lord with me, follow me." But the road that Mattathias would follow led to the hills, and he became a refugee and, in fact, the only leader of a guerrilla faction known as the Maccabees. Mattathias would soon die, but this struggle, which became an armed civil war in ancient Israel, was led by his son Judah, known as Judah the Maccabee.
Maccabee. That word means the hammers, and their mission was to hammer back into their land a sense of Jewish identity. It was a long and a bitter struggle, and it must be emphasized that it was not just between Jew and non-Jew. It was also a civil war, and tragically, Jews killed each other in the struggle to rebuild and renew. The war raged on for 3 bloody years in the hills surrounding Jerusalem. The small Maccabean faction, fighting against insurmountable odds, were miraculously victorious, and they recaptured Jerusalem. But much work lay ahead. Their enemies had destroyed the temple, and true victory lay in the act of restoring their holy temple. Now, legend tells us that there was a great miracle in those days. Rededication and rebuilding of the temple required the rekindling of the temple's candelabra. But the Maccabees could find only 1 flask of purified oil, just enough to last 1 day. They lit it nevertheless, and miraculously, the oil lasted for 8 full days to allow the Maccabees to have the light they needed to rebuild.
Many people today feel that the 8-day celebration of Hanukkah is a reflection of the fact that because of this guerrilla war and the struggle in ancient Palestine, the Jews had been forced to miss the other 8-day holiday of their calendar known as Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles in the fall. But whatever the reason, a sense of rebuilding and rededicating was established, and Judah declared that from then on what was and what is still each year the 25th day of Kislev, the Jewish month which falls in the winter season, Jews would light candles and sing songs and remember the rededication of their ancient temple. And so Hanukkah has flourished. It was never mentioned in the Bible, however. In fact, the reading from our tradition, which tells us to remember Hanukkah, includes a line from Zechariah, which says, "Not by might and not by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord." It's as though our tradition is inclined to shun the military victory and to remember, in fact, this was a victory of the Spirit. It began as a plea on the part of an old man to follow the ways of the Lord. It culminated with a lighting of lights and a rebuilding of a synagogue. And each year it reappears for us as a time to reflect and to value our freedom as Jews and freedom for all people everywhere to express themselves the way they believe they should.
A one-day supply of oil that lasted for 8 days. A miracle. The Maccabees, their victory against insurmountable odds that restored religious freedom, another miracle. This menorah reminds Jews everywhere of both these miracles. So it's no surprise that for more than 2,100 years, the menorah has symbolized Hanukkah, a celebration that is also known as the Festival of Lights.
The central symbol of the Festival of Lights of Hanukkah is the menorah. This is a Hanukkah menorah, and this would be for the second night of Hanukkah. The middle candle is known in Hebrew as the shamash, which means the messenger, and it literally is used as a messenger of light as we light a new candle each night. On the 8th night of Hanukkah, of course, all 8 candles will be lit. We'd have 8 lights for the 8 nights of the festival. The reason for the menorah goes back to what happened in the ancient temple in Jerusalem. Because when the Maccabees finished the process of purifying and rejuvenating the ancient temple, they ceremoniously relit the candelabra of the temple. And the candelabra, in fact, remains the central symbol of Judaism. Normally it has 7 candles, but for Hanukkah, being the 8-day festival of lights, you always find 8 slots for 8 candles, and the 9th being the messenger. Some of the menorahs you will see are smaller than this, some larger. It matters not. The idea is that they have 8 candles for the 8 nights. And when a Jew comes to light a candle, he or she says a blessing. At Hanukkah, we thank God for giving us the instruction and the inspiration to light lights. We, in fact, believe that we are partners with God. And when we light a Hanukkah light, we reflect the very act of God when He made this world and started off by creating light for all of us to see and to live with. In many times and places throughout Jewish history, Jews, of course, had to keep the light, the music, the lore of their festivals to themselves because of the problems they faced due to pogroms and persecution. And so in many families in America and elsewhere who are descended from Poland and other places where times were harsh for the Jews, the candelabra, the Hanukkah menorah, is specifically set out in the window as a bold expression, a proud expression of our belief in the light and joy of this holiday. And so you will see in many homes, in fact, that this candelabra, and it's a beautiful sight on the 8th night, is in the window so all can see it.
We are blessed that we are in a beautiful country like this, that we can practice our religion the way we want it. We don't have to be afraid to put the candles in the window. And it's just beautiful. God bless America.
You know, one of the best things about Hanukkah is that it is primarily celebrated at home. It's a fun holiday where families get a chance to relax and enjoy simply being together. You've seen the lighting of the menorah, but there's much more to Hanukkah. Other traditions that bring a festive atmosphere into the home. There are games of chance, gifts, and traditional foods.
In the Jewish tradition, holidays are celebrated not only by praying and remembering, but even by tasting and by feeling, by smelling. And so from Eastern Europe came the tradition, still followed today in many, many Jewish homes, of eating potato pancakes known as latkes, really filled with oil to commemorate the sense, the taste of the oil that was the centerpiece of the miracle of the ancient Maccabees in the temple.
Oh yeah, a big part of Hanukkah plays really potato latkes. This is made of potatoes and eggs, salt and pepper, a little bit of matzah meal. And you mix it up, you know, you grate the potatoes and you mix up with all the other ingredients, and then you fry it on a frying pan.
We were raised like French people, and French people, maybe they do now, I don't know, but we don't eat potatoes with sugar. And I would see my mother peeling the potatoes and making a cake out of it and shredding it, and then what is that? And she put sugar on it. I never wanted to touch it. To me, it was just terrible. But everybody else loved it.
I'm drawn to the smell, and I love the crispy edges of the latkes. You know, I like them real crispy.
My mother made the gray. She always figured you had to let the potatoes lay around a while till they got gray. Then she fried them black. Then she served them with sour cream so we could recognize where they were on the plate.
And then there was always the decision of how to eat latkes. Even when they were very good, do you sprinkle sugar on them, like a hard sugar? It's a powdered sugar. I said, no, applesauce with latkes. And now I like with sour cream, not with applesauce. Sour cream and latkes, this is the blessing. That's wonderful.
Hanukkah tradition includes legends about heroic women who helped in the fight for religious freedom. The most famous, recorded in the book of Maccabees, tells of Hannah and her 7 sons who were tortured and killed because they refused to participate in the pagan ceremonies ordered by Antiochus. Such stories are an important aspect of Hanukkah for many Jewish women, such as Miriam Mendelssohn, who find inspiration in the courage of the women in ancient Israel.
One of the really terrible decrees against the Jewish people at that time was that whenever there would be a wedding, in order for there to be a wedding and for a husband and wife to live together, the bride, after the wedding ceremony, would first have to submit to the Greek ruler of that area. And as you can imagine, that was a terrible, terrible decree for the Jewish people. And many of them stopped marrying completely. And it came to pass that a daughter of the priestly family became engaged, and they celebrated her wedding. And in the midst of all of the finery and all of the celebration, she stood up in front of all the guests and unexpectedly took her gown and ripped it. And she said to all the shocked guests, she said, I'm sure you're all shocked at what I've done, my strange and immodest behavior. She said, this shocks you, but the fact that the daughters of Israel are being defamed and shamed by the Greek rulers, this you're hiding from, and this you're turning your faces away from. And she proceeded, she didn't stop with that, she proceeded to berate the entire assembly at length until they were so ashamed of their conduct that they resolved to join the military revolt.
In honor of the role that Jewish women played in the fight for freedom, there is a tradition in some Jewish homes that once the candles are lit, women are freed from doing any work.
How do we play this game? Everyone know how to play this game? Yes.
A delightful game is played with something called a dreidel.
First, we're going to put pennies in the middle, right? Whoever spins, if they get a nun, what do they get? Nothing, right.
It says right there.
And if they get a gimel, what do they get? Everything. If they get a, not except for one, right? We always have to leave one in the middle. If they get a hay, they get half, right? And if they get a shin, they have to put in. Our game is we're gonna put in 2 pennies if they get a shin. Okay. Okay. You're going first. Are you the oldest? Lauren's the oldest. Lauren goes.
Dreidel, which spins and over which children laugh and even gamble little bits of money known as Hanukkah geld, has 4 letters imprinted upon it, which stand for the phrase Nes Gadol Haya Sham, which is Hebrew, for the phrase a great miracle happened there. And when the children play this game, each letter stands for a value of money, and the money is collected at the end and supposed to be given to charities. This has lent itself, of course, to the gift-giving process of more modern times.
The dreidel is said to have been popular even before the celebration of Hanukkah. During the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, soldiers could execute anyone caught practicing the Jewish customs, such as studying the Torah. Pious Jews ignored these orders and studied their holy books in spite of the threats. But when they gathered to study, they always had a dreidel ready. When students heard the soldiers coming, they would quickly hide their books and pretend that they were simply playing a game. Clever. As for gift-giving during the Hanukkah season, traditionally it was customary to reward children for their religious studies with Hanukkah Geld, money. These days, many Jewish families here in America exchange gifts during Hanukkah, but that's a fairly recent addition to the celebration. Gift-giving, yes. But for all Jews during this Hanukkah season, it's more a giving of the soul. Maybe the very best part of Hanukkah is that it really lacks formality. As you can see, it can be experienced in many different ways. Hanukkah is a holiday which lends itself to the freedom and creativity of the human spirit. Jewish people really believe that the reason people live in this world is to be partners with God.
The pews around and behind me in this historic temple are empty now, but each time they fill with people who come to pray and to remember, the temple is filled with a sense of dedication again. And that, in fact, is the meaning of this festival known as Hanukkah. The word Hanukkah means dedication. Through all times, it has been celebrated and observed in different manners, but that central theme of rededicating the purpose, the brightness, the joy of Hanukkah remains constant.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvosav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah.
Hanukkah reminds Jews to restore and renew, and to celebrate a holiday that really has universal meaning.
This holiday is an historical commemoration. It was the first time in all of history that a people deliberately and carefully, and with their blood and with their songs, set themselves free to be themselves.
Hanukkah comes at a time of year when the days are shorter. Lighting the menorah, its glow piercing the night, reminds us of the moment when light is born from darkness, hope from despair.
It may seem to be just a small matter that a child can light a Hanukkah candle and enjoy a small gift and sing with his or her parents, but to us it really is miraculous. Perhaps the miracle is not so much how long the oil lasted in the temple and how much damage was done and then repaired, but the miracle is that children in this world are free enough to set aglow their dreams and hopes through a simple festival known as Hanukkah.
The form and focus of all holiday celebrations reflect the times and culture in which they are celebrated. Through its 2,100-year history, the observance of Hanukkah likewise has changed. Probably most dramatic have been changes here in America in recent decades. Hanukkah, once a minor festival in the Jewish calendar, has assumed a more dominant place in Jewish life in America, where the Christmas season and related gift-giving is so much a part of the culture. But the influence of Christmas on Hanukkah is much less important than the central theme, the very basis of both holidays: hope, love, and freedom. Hanukkah represents a major opportunity, a tremendous invitation for families to experience a sense of generations, to discover what their communities mean to them, and to share a great deal in a world that could use quite a bit of just that.
Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out.
I remember seeing over in one corner, I think maybe it was my first experience of a Santa Claus, and seeing a huge mound and a throne, a built-up thing with lots of dwarves, mechanical dwarves, you know, building and so forth, and lines of children, and looking around the toys and seeing this rather forbidding, you know, Santa Claus. They're always big and heavy and the beard, and you know, you're half frightened as well as attracted to this and fascinated by that figure. And I found myself on this monstrous knee, this gentleman's knee in the red suit. I don't know, I must have been about 5 or 6. And he was asking me questions, and he said, you know, are you excited about the Christmas season? And I said, no. He said, no. He said, aren't you looking forward to getting a nice toy, a couple of toys for Christmas? And I said, no. He said, no. Well, I saw you looking at those toys out there, and you seem to be happy. And said, well, if you're not expecting a toy for Christmas, then what are you looking for the toys for? He said, well, it's a toy for Hanukkah. And there was a great silence. And he looked around at all the kids waiting to come up. And he bent his head toward my ear, and he says, "A gesund an dein Käppele." And he patted my head, so that was... So I was immediately reassured that the whole world was Jewish.
Don't let the light